You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 28th of May 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting to you live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Thomas Waterhouse. Coming up on today's programme.
So tell us about Iran.
Well, first of all, the bottom line is Iran's never going to have a nuclear weapon. And if recent events have done anything, is just remind us once again that they are the world's leading sponsor of terrorism.
Tensions flare once again in the Middle East, with the US and Iran carrying out fresh tit-for-tat airstrikes. We look at where this leaves efforts to bring about peace and improve the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, with the tone there in Washington still far from conciliatory. We'll be quite literally taking a coffee break as we flick through the cover story of Monocle's June issue, which looks at our selection of the best places to get your caffeine fix. And Fernando Augusto Pacheco is here on set with the Global Countdown.
Yes, indeed, Thomas. And today we head to Namibia to find out what's on their hit parade.
OK, all that right here on The Briefing with me, Thomas Waterhouse. It's great to have you all with us here on today's briefing. Over the weekend, there were hints and signals that a blanket of calm might be a matter of days away for the Middle East. But what a difference a matter of days can make. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps says it has targeted an American base in the region after the US conducted fresh strikes in southern Iran. As tensions build, once again, hopes are also fading that a peace deal might be inked, with US President Donald Trump rejecting an Iranian report that agreement on the Strait of Hormuz has been reached. Joining us now from Dubai is Monocle's Gulf correspondent, Inzamam Rashid. Inzamam, what more do we know about these latest US and Iranian strikes?
Afternoon, Thomas. Well, the latest strikes really put the ceasefire, which, as you know, was implemented on the 8th of April between the US, Israel and Iran, hanging by a thread, because this is the second time in 48 hours that we've seen fighting in the war with Iran flare up once again. The US military carried out fresh strikes with Iran, targeting military site on the coast of the country at the Bandar Abbas port area. Now, US officials said that this site posed a threat to US forces and commercial maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. And there were also multiple Iranian drones, which were reportedly shot down and intercepted as well. Now, in retaliation, Iran has retaliated, firstly attacking Kuwait, where they've targeted American assets in the country. Kuwait's military said its air defenses were confronting hostile missile and drone attacks early this morning. And then the IRGC also claimed that it's targeted an American airbase in the region. We're not entirely sure where that is. It could have been in Kuwait, where some of those missiles and drones were being intercepted. And they warned of a more decisive response, saying that the enemy knows that the aggression will not go unanswered. As I mentioned, Thomas, this is the second exchange of fire between the US and Iran in just 48 hours. Earlier this week, Tehran claimed that the US self-defense strikes in the Strait of Hormuz were a blatant violation of the ceasefire. And right now, once again, we see these two countries flaring up. And as you say, tit for tat. But the big question is what knock-on effect does this have on any negotiations for a peace deal?
And Inzamam, in a separate development, President Trump has sort of stoked a fresh regional fire, if you like, by issuing a statement in which he claims Oman will, quote, behave just like everybody else, or we'll have to blow them up. What kind of fallout have we had from those comments from President Trump?
Yeah, God, I heard those comments yesterday from the president, and I had to watch that video of him mentioning it a few times just to make sure that he was definitely saying Oman, that he definitely meant Oman and that it wasn't a mistake that he made. But it was pretty clear he was talking about Oman, because we know Iran and Oman have been having conversations back and forth about, whether the two countries could have some form of a control over the Strait of Hormuz once this war has concluded. Oman, of course, has tried to play a negotiator, has tried to play this peace broker between the US and Iran. Remember, before this war started, they were the ones hosting talks in Geneva between the two sides. They obviously didn't go as well as planned, and as a result, the war started. But look, this has caused quite a bit of controversy, particularly in the region and particularly inside Oman. Just looking at some Omani analysts and hearing as to what some of the Omani government officials have got to say. Abdullah Babood, who's actually very close with the government, works very closely with the foreign ministry, said that Trump's crude language and his threat to, destroy Oman, the peaceful and neutral state, America's trading partner for decades, and the reliable mediator that has repeatedly aided Washington through diplomacy and back channels, is considered a reckless, dangerous, and utterly unacceptable act. I think any attack on Oman and any threat, even let alone an actual attack, it is pretty dangerous, and I think will cause a lot of upset in this region, as it already has done.
I'd like to move on now to discuss your latest piece in the current issue of Monocle. You've been to Abu Dhabi to meet the team at one of the world's fastest growing military-industrial groups there.
Yeah, and what a time to go visit this place in the middle of a war where the UAE has been impacted so deeply. Remember, the UAE's bared the brunt of Iranian missiles. More than 3,000 missiles and drones have come into the UAE over the last 3 months ever since this conflict began. But I was lucky enough that Edge Group opened up its doors, allowed us to come in and actually look at how an arms manufacturer, this conglomerate which has been growing over the last 5 to 6 years, is dealing throughout this conflict. Look, this is an organization which is essentially backed by sovereign wealth here in the UAE and is creating weapons for the country, but also doing a huge amount of export as well. This is an organization which it's got around $5 billion worth of revenue last year. 70% proportion of its annual booked orders are exported out of the country. Around $20.4 billion current order backlog across its defense, its aerospace, and its technology business. And they've just got a huge number of employees working across different sectors. Now, what was fascinating about being part and going and visiting the Edge Group was not only seeing how they are creating warships, not just for the UAE, but other countries as well, how they're creating weapons of mass destruction, warheads, how they're creating drones and using AI incorporated now into the world of warfare, and how, they've got special radars and systems which basically can intercept or know when drones are coming into the country, when they can then launch their drones, which would then take out some of the enemy missiles and drones coming into the country. And we saw all of this in real time, whilst the UAE was actually using Edge's actual products. Throughout this whole conflict, we were seeing the men and women in the factories working day in, day out, trying to adapt their weapons, trying to adapt their defense systems, just in order to try and keep the UAE safe. And this has been the whole ethos, is actually before, yes, they've got a huge international export side of their business, but it is very much protecting the UAE first and foremost. And these guys were almost an addition to the Ministry of Defense here, in addition to the army in the UAE, by playing this role of creating these weapons and creating these defense systems to keep the people here safe.
Okay, fascinating stuff. Inzamam Rashid, Monocle's Gulf correspondent, thank you very much for that update. Now here's Anita Riotta with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Thomas. The U.S. Embassy in Kyiv says it has remained open and that reports of changes to its operations are false. The statement comes after the EU's foreign policy chief claimed that the Americans had left the Ukrainian capital following Russia's threat to escalate its attacks. Taiwan has ruled 2 major Chinese apps as potential cybersecurity risks. The mapping apps that display countdown timers for traffic lights on some roads in Taiwan also request permissions to access sensitive personal data, transmitting externally while inactive and transferring data to servers in China. And finally, in South Korea, religious groups, universities, and public institutions are offering free or affordable accommodation options for BTS fans who have become targets of accommodation price hikes. With the supergroup's June concerts approaching in Busan, supply remains limited. The June 12th concert will mark the third time the city has hosted a BTS event after a fan meeting in 2019 and a concert in 2022. Those are today's headlines. Back to you, Thomas.
Thanks very much, Anita. Time now for a look at some business news, and joining us for that is Bloomberg's Johan Potts. Johan, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Thomas.
Johan, let's start here in the UK, where a former Prime Minister has been in the news this week, calling for the country to exploit its oil and gas resources in the North Sea. You have a story today about Cambridge University's green investing plans.
Yeah, over in the United States, ESG or green investing has really become something of a dirty word, at least among many conservatives. And high-profile boycott threats have seen some of the world's biggest investors really dialing back on their climate change commitments. But a move by Cambridge University here in the UK is evidence that some European investors are taking a different approach. We understand that Barclays and HSBC are among the banks set to lose cash holdings from Cambridge University. It's pulling hundreds of millions of pounds from institutions that finance fossil fuels. We're told the university's already shifted £135 million, with more on the way. Now, the reallocations come amid the university's ongoing campaign to get more than 80 other academic institutions across the UK to turn away from banks that are still supporting growth in fossil fuels. That's according to data compiled by Bloomberg. Now, UK banks have been scaling back their exposure to fossil fuels, but for some of them it does remain significant. Barclays and HSBC, to take those two examples, have participated in about $12 billion of loans and bonds for fossil fuel companies just this year so far. Now, Cambridge isn't shifting all of the money at the same time. Many of the banks and building societies that they've identified as climate change compliant are fairly small, and the university has a lot of money. It's frankly a rather nice problem to deal with.
And Johan, as we've covered here on the show before, voters in Switzerland are mulling over a referendum proposal to cap the country's population. What have business leaders been saying?
Yeah, in 1960, a little over 5 million people lived in Switzerland. Today, that number is 9 million and rising. Well, next month, Swiss voters will have their say in a referendum which seeks to cap the country's population at 10 million people. Polls show that the electorate is pretty much split down the middle, giving the proposal a realistic chance of passing. Well, this week, leaders of big business have been having their say, and perhaps you won't be surprised to hear they are not keen. The chairman of pharmaceuticals giant Roche calls it dangerous for our society and for the economy. He says that Switzerland can't meet the need for bright minds on its own, and that it's vital to keep the borders open for top talent. And food company Nestle says the free movement of skilled professionals helps to ensure the country remains innovative and prosperous. Now, what's got the business leaders riled is that because, unlike anti-immigration campaigns in other European countries, the Swiss push doesn't just target asylum seekers and refugees. It would also, if needed, bar high-earning bankers, scientists and engineers from entering the country. Whether voters struggling with expensive rents and crowded trains will pay any attention, well, we'll find out in less than 3 weeks' time.
OK, Johan Potts from Bloomberg, thank you very much for that business news update. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio with me, Thomas Waterhouse. You're back with The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Now, this Thursday is a very important day for the editorial team here at Midori House. Our June issue of Monocle magazine is hitting newsstands, and on the black and peach cover of this latest edition is a topic that's very dear to my own heart, and that's coffee. We've dedicated a full 18 pages to our pick of the best beans, blends, baristas and brews. And joining us now is Monocle writer Julia Jen, the organiser of this coffee special. Good afternoon to you, Julia.
Good afternoon.
Have you had your own cup this morning?
Yes, I did, and I had an iced latte. I walked down to our cafe on Chiltern Street and had my morning treat.
And how was that?
Well, it was obviously delicious. Everyone should come to our beautiful cafe on Chiltern Street. No, but it is lovely to start off a very hot morning in London with something iced, something to chill you.
Absolutely, it sounds delicious. Let's discuss our freshly printed issue about freshly brewed cups. What are the key trends or changes that you've noticed about how we make or consume coffee globally?
Well, I think what we were exploring in this feature was the third coffee culture wave really maturing. So people really finding out and really being inquisitive. And I think this is something we'll talk about in the examples that we'll discuss. Inquisitive, where are their beans coming from? Where have they been grown? Who have they been grown by? You know, is it a family-owned farm? Is it sort of mass production? And then the journey that bean then goes on. Where is it washed? Where is it roasted? And then how it kind of ends up as a coffee in your cup. And I think also another thing that really jumped out at me is choice, just the amount of choice that you now have. I mean, I had my coffee iced this morning, but of course you can have kind of matcha, you can have all sorts of different colours. I think Blank Street, one of our one of the brands that we picked, which is really making a splash in the world, especially for Gen Z, especially for the younger generation who are really discovering their taste in coffee. And, you know, one of the most vivid examples of this is Samba Coffee Roasters in Athens. And when our reporter talked to the founders of that, they were talking about how Greeks now prefer the Freddo espresso. That's actually using real beans to make an espresso rather than a frappe, which was kind of instant coffee. And that really defined Greek coffee culture. And I think that really encapsulates it.
Now, in this issue, Monocle has selected 25 businesses that are game changers for this industry. And we, of course, used to think of coffee greatness coming from maybe Australia or New Zealand. But a big chunk of our pick are actually Asian pioneers.
Yes, and I think this is one of the most fascinating bits of this entire story. So if we go straight to China didn't have a coffee culture really 10, 15 years ago, and suddenly it's just boomed. So we have the biggest player there, Luckin Coffee, and that's really dominating global coffee culture now, and with deals, you know, buying up Blue Bottle, for example, in the US. But Luckin Coffee has just, spread so rapidly. We have a fact that, 2023, they opened 8,000 outlets in China in 1 year alone, which is so impressive. And then, we're looking across Southeast Asia. There are some really big players, and domestic, even though, of course, this region is creating, a quarter of the world's beans, growing them and processing them. But then also you've got domestic production there is really, really growing. So in Indonesia, for example, we found that domestic consumption has tripled since 2020. And then if you go to smaller places around the world, a country that you might not know about. So Ukraine, for example, Black Honey, that's a coffee brand. Again, that inquisitiveness, finding out where those beans are coming from. So Black Honey is one of our selections, and that was opened up by the first Q grader. So that's a kind of coffee equivalent of a wine sommelier. She opened up that brand and really, I think, bringing together good design, but also really understanding the origins of the coffee and people as well. Customers being really, really inquisitive and really picky as well. When I was talking to her, to this sommelier Q grader from Black Honey, she was saying people are really picky. And they won't just have any coffee, and they'll ask you loads of questions. And that's just in a country like Ukraine.
How difficult or how hard is it for an independent or a small coffee chain or startup to survive in this increasingly complex market? Well,
so one of the things that we came across in our research was that actually coffee is in a perilous position, because if we look at weather changes and if we look at, climate change, rising temperatures, severe weather events, actually that really affects the coffee plant. Of course, first of all, it's already fragile. It already needs big differences in temperature, so cold nights, hot days to really thrive and really create that perfect flavour that the consumer is looking for. But then also because of all of these temperature changes and climate changes, we're seeing that even by 2050, 50%, up to 50% of all of the world's sort of coffee land where we grow our coffee now, 50% of that is at threat. So it's actually the actual product itself and is kind of under threat. And so there are opportunities there for beanless coffee. So we came across several brands. One of them which didn't get included is a brand called Prefer in Singapore. And they're, pioneering beanless coffee in that way. So there are opportunities, but then, it's fascinating that the actual brand, the product itself is under threat.
Is this therefore a good time to launch a new coffee shop? And might Monocle have some advice for people who might be thinking about launching a coffee shop?
If you can combine, as I said before, great design, but also that absolute inquisitiveness into where your coffee is coming from, and you're an expert and you can just talk about it to your customer and you can really engage. There are so many different factors coming together here. I guess when you walk into the Monocle Cafe, you can sort of see that. You'll see where all the coffees come from. So in London, we're going from sourcing from All Press, which is a New Zealand brand, which we've also included here. So if you can combine that sense of, comfort for the consumer, that they understand they're sort of in good hands when it comes to how their coffee is made, who it's made by, the barista as well, the charm of the barista. That's become
so important.
So important, because you want to have that conversation. You want to be able to ask little questions and find out interesting facts about where your drink is coming from, even though, if it's an espresso, it's gone in a flash. So lots of factors there.
And Julia, do you have a personal favourite from this 18-page spread about our best coffee picks?
Absolutely. My favourite is Pingado in Portugal. So this is the small Portuguese brand. They operate on these mobile bikes almost, serving up beakers. These are Portuguese espressos. And these are two 25-year-old entrepreneurs, 25 years old, to be creating such a splash in the Portuguese or Lisbon coffee scene. And they'll sort of roll up on the beach, in parks, at events, just on the street, and you'll just be walking past and you'll quickly grab a quick beaker and walk on. And I just think that's such a great thing to have part of your urban fabric, really, just these little coffee spots, serving up also quintessentially national sort of drinks. The beaker is really part of that Portuguese coffee experience.
Okay, Monocle's Julia Jen, thank you very much. Monocle's June issue, a reminder for you, our June issue is on newsstands from today. You are listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. It's Thursday on The Briefing, which means it's time for the Global Countdown. And joining me in the studio is Monocle's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Fernando, how are you?
I'm very good. And as it's your first Global Countdown, I have a little bit of a treat for you, Thomas.
I can't wait. You've chosen a brand new country, apparently, for this Global Countdown, whose music has never been highlighted on this segment before.
And there's a reason for it. First of all, Namibia. It's a country that I've always wanted to visit. It's definitely on my holiday list for the coming kind of years. But the thing is, they have quite a small music scene. They are very influenced by their big neighbor, South Africa. So I was kind of waiting until we have an artist from Namibia in the charts. So basically, I gave you a little spoiler here. But we have to admit, South Africa is extremely influential in their charts, as you will be able to see in the top 5.
So let's plunge into your pick of what's making waves there in Namibia. What is coming up in for your first pick?
A little bit of Amapiano for you. So at number 5, we have Benzu, Books and Keys, and Tango Supreme with Mopepe. Can you imagine being in a nightclub listening to Amapiano? I think this is my dream. Not just to go to Namibia, but South Africa as well, because those artists are from South Africa. There's something about this kind of thumping beat of Amapiano that I love it.
Absolutely, yeah.
You have to be in a club to feel that kind of
the energy rise.
And it's fantastic. It's a quite unique for the South African music scene, and it's conquering the world. It's not just Namibia. I think Amapiano really, we have concerts here in London with the music genre as well. And this song is very, very summery, very good to dance to.
And what's coming up next?
Next, a little bit more on my piano for you. And I'll tell you a funny story about the main producer there. It's 031, Chopper, Al Chapo, and Benzu again with Fast Fast. it's so elegant, Amapiano, because it doesn't give you what you want. It's not so explosive, like as a music genre. It's very... it's hard to describe it, but I think you can feel the energy there. And I'll tell you, it's not that funny, but 031 Chopa is one of the biggest leading producers, music producers in South Africa. But you know what was his previous job?
Tell me.
He was a salesman at a local Crocs shop. The ones that everyone hates.
The shoes?
Yes, I can't imagine, because I've seen pictures of him. He doesn't come across as a Crocs man to me, but that's where he was working before.
Okay, it's time now for your third selection.
So, even though there's still a little bit of my piano, but this is a bit more melodic. It's quite beautiful. I'm not sure if it's for the dance floor. Could be even a wedding, perhaps. And number 3, we have Traxon Molly, DJ Pragmatic Essay, and then the fella with Botahelo Ke Eng, which apparently means, what is life? Not gonna lie, I like that kind of more emotional beats, and I've read the lyrics for this song. It is for those, when you feel a little bit lost in life,
I often do.
So you have to listen more to this beautiful song. What is life? It's basically giving you what you need to do when you're feeling a bit like this.
Yeah, that was very mellow and melodic. I really enjoyed that one. Time for number 2.
And number 2, we'll talk a little bit more about this after we hear, because he is from Namibia. Finally, thankfully, he's in the chart, so I can actually portray a little bit about their music scene. He's a very young guy. He started in youth choirs, but now he's doing kind of, even though, again, a tiny bit of Amapiano in there, I think there's a bit more freestyle rap and kind of a different energy, perhaps, to the traditional South African beats there. So this is Shaq's Champion with Jealousy.
Shit. $100 ni kwa simu mpokoto ya mumini na mate chela ati aishiwa manikuwa kapamburozi mugoshe moshe liwini na moshe you jealous me.
I like finally that we have a Namibian there at the top 5, and he's a big name there. So for their year-end celebrations in Windhoek, he was performing, and I saw an interview with him, at the Namibian press, and then he was saying, that people should, Namibians should be proud of their music artists, even though their music scene is much smaller, but he said that we don't necessarily need to copy artists from South Africa. So it's quite nice that he's young, but I think he's coming across as kind of this very powerful force in their music industry.
Yeah, I love that one. And now your final pick.
Maybe I would invite her for my wedding, because this is kind of proper gospel, but it's gospel that you can dance. Can I call gospel disco? Maybe.
Let's see.
Maybe I can. Let's see. So from South Africa, it's Nui with Song of Hope.
Your life is a heavy road, bare feet on the stone, still I carry hope. Sweet
Goosebumps in the studio now.
Absolutely, yeah.
What a voice. It's so clear, it's really, really stunning. And I think, and I like that there is kind of a remix. It's not just your traditional gospel music, but the voice, her voice.
Yeah,
is incredible. So that's what I say. Maybe not discotheque, but a wedding for sure. And Nui, she has kind of a long-standing career. She's not a new name that just came across. So no wonder she's at number 1 there in Namibia.
It was really great to have a first look at some of the best music from Namibia. Thank you for that,
My
Fernando
pleasure.
Augusto Pacheco, with this week's Global Countdown. And that's all for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Chris Chermak, our researcher was Josefina Gomez, and our studio manager was Elliot Greenfield. The Briefing is back at the very same time tomorrow. I've been Thomas Waterhouse. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye from everyone here at Midori House.